It seemed incredible when a young husband was arrested for shooting the wife and baby daughter he appeared to idolize. More incredible still, his reaction when confronted with video of his murdered family.
His expression was in fact that of someone who was laughing. He was kind of laughing at his work.
The case of Neil Entwistle is one of the most bizarre in recent criminal history. Why would this British computer expert, enjoying a millionaire lifestyle in America, wipe out his own family?
It was just unbelievable and horrible.
And then as they got closer, you could see the blood, and it was obvious that they weren't alive anymore.
Neil Entwistle says on tape that he's innocent, but scientists have now analyzed his voice to test his story.
I didn't see anything.
It needs to be looked at because the alibi now is in question.
A leading firearms expert has analyzed Neil Entwistle's version of events.
It would be impossible to hold a gun of this type and shoot straight down. You couldn't get your hand high enough above your head.
But could he really shoot a mother and baby and then laugh at what he'd done?
Who is this man? Is he the loving husband or a type of Jekyll and Hyde?
The shootings happened far from Neil Entwistle's Nottinghamshire home, in the town of Hopkinton, Massachusetts. Here, violent crime used to be something that only happened on TV cop shows. For Bob Falcione, editor of the Hopkinton News, all that changed in January 2006.
The first I heard of this was when I was having coffee across the street, when a friend turned away to answer the phone, then turned to me and said, "Have you heard of a double homicide in Hopkinton?" Then my phone rang, and it was the chief of police letting me know that there'd be a press conference at the police station.
District Attorney Martha Coakley, Middlesex, on my right.
The district attorney broke the news. The first murder here for 11 years. Few of the local cops had any experience of investigating a homicide.
Yesterday afternoon, approximately 6:30 or so, at 6 Cubs in Hopkinton, the Hopkinton police went to check on Rachel Entwistle, age 27, her husband Neil Entwistle, also age 27, and their 9-month-old daughter, Lillian Entwistle. They discovered upstairs on a bed the bodies of Rachel Entwistle and her daughter. Police did not see any signs of violence or what the cause of death would be.
At first, it looked like a tragic accident. Police thought Rachel Entwistle and baby Lillian were victims of carbon monoxide poisoning. It took an autopsy to reveal the truth.
We do believe, subject to the autopsy reports, that they were the victim of probably a small caliber gunshot, and it may just have been one, through both the mother and the child.
A single bullet, but with 2 victims. Right from the outset, this case promised to be one of the most bizarre that these investigators had ever encountered.
I have a photograph, it's a registry of motor vehicles photograph of Rachel Entwistle. We do not at this time have a photograph of the child. We have been in the process of locating Neil Entwistle, who authorities believe is traveling.
Do you not have a picture of him, Barbara?
I do not.
Is it fair to call Mr. Entwistle a suspect?
No. Well, I'm not going to label anybody a suspect at this time.
As the DA spoke, Neil Entwistle was already 3,000 miles away in England. So what did he know about the shooting? And why had he fled? The path that led to a brutal murder in America began here, in the city of York. It's here that Neil Entwistle's student romance began in 1999. Neil, studying electronics, was introduced to Rachel on a placement from her English literature course in Boston. They met in the York University Rowing Club. They raced together, dated, and got engaged. In his entry on the Friends Reunited website, Neil Entwistle sounded excited about those first heady days.
Getting married to the most amazing woman in the world this summer. Rachel.
There was a force about her, an energy within her that was very dynamic. Something to do with her petite size and bounciness. I mean, she just seemed to love everything she was doing.
Fellow student Susie Dixon watched a relationship develop between two very different people.
With Neil, he seemed quite quiet and shy and a little bit uncomfortable. I just felt that because of Rachel's energy for life, that she perhaps was leading to some extent, that she was the one that was the key to the partnership.
The first home for the young couple was in the Worcestershire market town of Droitwich. Rachel taught English and drama at a local high school. Neil's honours degree landed him a computing job at the defence contractor Kinetic, much of whose work is top secret. Neil joked about his role on the same Friends Reunited website.
Making bombs and other stuff for a living. I'd tell you more, but I'd have to kill you.
But though his work was secret, Neil Entwistle seemed happy to live out his personal life in public, online. He posted photographs of his Mediterranean honeymoon on a family website he'd created.
I went to the wedding, and after that we corresponded by letter or text. When Rachel wrote to me to tell me that she was expecting a baby, she was full of how happy she was.
Baby Lillian was born in April 2005, and photos were soon added to the hundreds already posted on the website. It had a simple signature: the happy family. But within 9 months, 2 of the happy family would be dead.
Sometimes in a murder case, the prime suspects can be the people you'd least suspect. A brand new lineup of unusual suspects. Thursdays at 10 on CI.
The harvest sale now with extra daily deals. Like this super comfy large corner group, just $12.99.
Starts Monday the 7th of September on CI.
Neil Entwistle, a computer scientist from Nottinghamshire, had married his American-born girlfriend Rachel, and in April 2005, their daughter Lily was born. In the summer of that year, the couple made a life-changing decision. They'd move to America, where Rachel could be closer to her family. The small town of Carver, Massachusetts, is 50 miles south of Boston. It's here they stayed initially, with Rachel's mother and stepfather, Priscilla and Joe Matarazzo. They spent the summer in the Matarazzos' spacious home. As the months went by, Neil Entwistle seemed in no hurry to find a job. To his parents-in-law, he appeared to be a wealthy young man with plenty of time to enjoy his new surroundings. Some of America's most beautiful and exclusive holiday spots are nearby Cape Cod.
They believed, because he worked for a computer company in England, that when he came to the United States, he would still be working for that company. And I believe he also convinced them that there was an offshore account, that the money went through, and that it was for $10,000 a month over a period of a year. Having heard that from Neil, they believed him. They believed that that was the case, that he did have this income, and therefore they weren't suspicious of anything else.
Neil bonded with his father-in-law. Joe Matarazzo took him to his gun club, where Neil knew how to handle one of the weapons from the collection Mr. Matarazzo kept at home. A gun similar to this one, a long-barreled .22 caliber revolver. New Year 2006 was another new beginning for the Entwistles. Still, it appeared, the happy family. Now they'd found their own place to live, in Hopkinton.
Hopkinton is more or less a bedroom community of about 15,000 people. It has some industry, some high-tech industry. Neil Entwistle had a background in high-tech, so that could have been one of the reasons he chose Hopkinton as a place to live.
Here's where they were to set up home, in one of Hopkinton's wealthiest suburbs.
The home at Six Cubs Path is an expensive home, probably around $860,000 if you want to lay down the cash. They had rented it for close to $3,000 a month.
But they enjoyed their new home for not much more than a week. When they moved in on January the 12th, Rachel and Lily had just 8 days to live. Joe Dwinell, a reporter on the Boston Herald, followed the story from the outset.
The police were first alerted that there was a possible missing person. A best friend of Rachel Entwistle, Joanna Gately, came to her house for a pre-scheduled dinner. Lights were still on in the house, and there was no answer at the door. And she began to worry, called police. I'm supposed to have a dinner. This isn't like them.
Somebody has said these people should have been there, and they're not. So the police would go in a case like this, and they would poke their head into rooms and see if anybody's home and if they're okay. They did look into the Entwistle's bedroom and saw crumpled up bedclothing all piled up as if it were just an unmade bed.
They didn't see or detect anything out of place, so they left. So the best friend, Joanna Gately, stays. She stays in the driveway in her car, and we're talking about January in New England, which is bitter cold, but she stayed like a good friend would in the driveway. The next day is Sunday. Once again, no answer. The family doesn't come back. The Entwistles are still missing. They all start to get nervous. Rachel's parents get involved.
That Sunday morning, I received a call from Joe Matarazzo, probably around 8:30, 9 o'clock. And basically, he was asking for my help.
Family friend Joe Petty was himself a cop for 30 years, and he feared the worst.
I told Joe, I said, you know, there aren't a whole lot of good scenarios here that I can imagine. The first thing that came to mind was that they may have been in an automobile accident. They don't have access to a cell phone. They could be tipped over in a car somewhere, and they can't get help.
It starts to get desperate. So they file a missing persons report with the Hopkinton police. 2 police officers go through the house. This time, it's different. They enter the house, and they hear playing in the background classical music. And that's what Rachel would put on to help her little girl, Lily, fall asleep. So the first thing they hear is this kind of soft classical music playing in the background. And then they detect a foul odor in the air. And they immediately know it's the smell of death. They start to make their way upstairs. The music is louder, the smell is very strong, and then they go to the master bedroom where there is no doubt that the smell of death is in the air. They pull back a pile of sheets and a comforter, and they see a mother and child, arm in arm, dead.
The autopsy revealed the same bullet had gone right through the body of baby Lily and into Rachel's left breast. But an X-ray later revealed something more astonishing. Rachel had also been shot in the head, though the bullet hole had at first gone unnoticed. Instead of a single gunshot, there'd been two. When the story broke the following morning, investigators knew more than they were telling.
We have been in the process of locating Neil Entwistle, who authorities believe is traveling
In the
Russell, trying to
country
track
or
him down.
out of the country?
Not going to comment.
Police had already called Boston's Logan Airport. They knew that 2 days earlier, at 8:15 on Saturday morning, Neil Entwistle had left with a one-way ticket to Britain. He landed at Heathrow and then, in a rented car, headed for his parents' house in the Nottinghamshire town of Worksop. In the hours that followed, his parents, Clifford, an ex-miner and a local councillor, his mother, Yvonne, a school dinner lady, became rapidly aware that their son was a wanted man.
The top story in the East Midlands tonight, a mother and daughter shot dead and an international manhunt underway for the father.
Neil Entwistle's parents are now waiting for him to hopefully come forward and shed.
Reporters didn't realize the fugitive was already inside his parents' house. In Massachusetts, with the time difference, it was still only lunchtime there. One of the cops had tracked down the Entwistle family phone number. At 6:10 in the evening British time, the phone rang.
Hi, is this Neil?
It is, yes.
Neil, this is Bob Manning. I'm a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police.
Hi.
How are you?
Well,
I'm calling you because we have some bad news about your wife and your daughter.
yeah.
We responded to the house and that they're deceased.
Yeah,
Do you know that?
I did.
You did.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me for a few minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
A few minutes became 2 hours as police listened in amazement to Neil Entwistle's story.
I mean, I think my parents are just keeping the eye on me, but I haven't even cried yet.
You haven't even cried?
No, not properly.
No? What would properly be?
I don't know what I'm thinking at the moment. It's almost because I'm here, it doesn't even seem real. There's just a void.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, it is real. Okay?
Yeah.
And, it is real. And something happened over here. And I'm trying to get as much information as I can.
I was devastated because it came out of the blue. I heard it on the radio. Funnily enough, her letter was sitting on my desk waiting for a reply at the time. So I went across almost to double check that the names were right, that the surnames and the Christian names all married up with the news item. And the shock just got worse. It was just unbelievable and horrible.
Mr. Entwistle, your son been making a statement?
Mr. Entwistle, do you believe your son is a killer?
Once it emerged that he was in Worksop, reporters staked out the house. Neil Entwistle remained holed up there for 17 days.
Would you like to say something about your family, Neil?
Are you going to the States, Neil?
He wasn't returning to America. In his absence, Rachel and Lily were buried in a single coffin.
When word came back from England that Neil Entwistle was not going to be at the funeral, that was a turning point in this case. It spoke a lot. He did not want to step foot back in America.
5 days after the funeral, Neil Entwistle suddenly quit his parents' house. British police, who'd been monitoring his movements, now decided to act.
We were concerned that he was going to abscond, but we hadn't received a formal request from the American authorities. That takes time, and it took us to February the 8th when they formally requested his extradition. By that stage, he had left his parents' address. We didn't know where he was, although on the 8th of February, we did receive intelligence to say that he was staying with a friend in West London, sleeping on his sofa. We missed him by a matter of minutes.
Detectives were told that Neil and his friend had left, heading for Ladbroke Grove tube station.
We again missed him as he had just left on a train.
It's not certain where he was heading, though his train was now only 2 stops from mainline Paddington Station.
We managed to get that train stopped at Royal Oak with the doors closed. We went up to him. He was very calm, didn't offer any resistance, and he is searched at the scene of his arrest. He had a letter addressed to his parents. It says, "I cannot take being made to feel much worse than I already do. I know how to keep myself safe, don't worry. You can tell people that I'm staying with friends to get some space." So that indicates to us that he was likely to.
Extradited to America, Neil Entwistle would stand trial for murder, while claiming he was completely innocent. His legal team would point the blame at someone else, the unlikeliest of suspects.
As horrible as it may be to hear, or even to think about, it was Rachel who did this terrible, terrible thing.
The final episode of Black Sails, Tuesday at 10 on History.
In 2006, British computer scientist Neil Entwistle had been extradited to America, accused of murdering his wife and 9-month-old baby daughter. More than 2 years elapsed before his trial in June 2008. Neil Entwistle opted not to testify or call any witnesses.
Neil had an absolute right to remain silent and to force the prosecution to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
But Entwistle's voice would be heard. From the phone call with Trooper Bob Manning, recorded just 3 days after the killings.
So he said that if we talk about stuff, I'm going to take notes on what we talk about.
Did he indicate whether he had any difficulty with that?
No, he said he understood.
When the day came when we were going to hear the 2-hour conversation between Trooper Manning and Neil Entwistle, there was just such a heightened tension in the court. You could hear a pin drop.
And then as I got closer, I could see the blood, and I pulled the covers back, and...
It's the first time, and the only time, you hear Neil Entwistle say anything, and it's just gripping.
Okay, if I just walk you through kind of how I got to this situation. It was Friday morning. We got up about 7 o'clock.
He said that on that Friday morning, he'd left Rachel and Lily sleeping to drive to a local shopping mall. He needed some computer equipment, but didn't find what he was looking for. And so he returned home. A house was quiet, except for the sound of classical music. A radio in Lily's bedroom was tuned to a Boston Classics station night and day as a comforter. In the master bedroom, it was a scene of pure horror.
You knew your wife and daughter were dead in the bed, but did you know what happened to them?
You mean as in being shot?
Is that what happened?
That's what I think. I mean, I saw it on Lily.
And where did you see it on Lily?
Kind of on the chest.
And what did you see?
There was like a hole. Kind of like a burn mark hole.
Mm-hmm. And what did you see on your wife?
I didn't see anything on Rachel.
What did you think happened to her?
Well, I just assumed the same.
His story grew more bizarre. Instead of calling for help, he said that he drove to Rachel's parents' house 50 miles away in the town of Carver. His intention was to commit suicide.
I know that Joe has guns in the house.
Okay.
And I did think that if I went to their house, I could load the gun and shoot myself.
You wanted to go to their house to try and get in, thinking you wanted to hurt yourself.
That was what I was at that point, yeah.
He said that he found the house locked and empty. And so, instead of killing himself, he drove to Boston to catch a flight to England.
It wasn't the right thing to do, was it?
What, to leave and go to England?
Neil Entwistle's mention of his father-in-law's guns gave detectives the critical lead they'd been looking for. As soon as the phone call was over, officers were sent to seize Joe Matarazzo's gun collection. Tests quickly revealed that the bullets which killed Lily and Rachel had come from Mr. Matarazzo's .22 caliber revolver. But how did the gun get from Hopkinton to Carver unless Neil Entwistle took it there?
I don't know what to tell you.
His whole world had become unraveled. He was not responsible for that. In the state of mind that he was in, he would be inconsistent in his explanations.
By the time of the trial, 2 years after that initial phone call, Neil Entwistle's story had changed. Now, the defense made a dramatic announcement.
Hard, cold, objective evidence pointed to one shooter and one shooter only, and that was Rachel.
The jury now heard a second scenario. Neil Entwistle claimed that when he returned home that Friday morning, he'd found Joe Matarazzo's gun beside Rachel on the bed.
Neil Entwistle claims that Rachel took her own life and killed their baby girl, and that to protect her honor, he picked up the gun and he brings it back to Carver, returns it to the gun case, all to protect his wife's name, her memory.
Suicide is still a big taboo. People do not talk about this. It is hard to deal with. It's unimaginable, and then when you factor in a little baby being shot, it's unfathomable.
Was it even physically possible for Rachel to shoot both the baby and herself?
She's cradling the baby girl, and you've got to take this long-barreled pistol, turn, and shoot the baby. So your baby is beginning to die in your arms. You only have one hand. You've got to take that long-barreled gun and somehow, shoot yourself just above the hairline while cradling your baby.
David Dyson is a barrister and firearms specialist who's given expert testimony in many murder trials.
The revolver used barrel of a similar length to this. It's not possible to turn the gun to such an angle that you could really shoot from that sort of a position. The only way it seems to me that it would be possible to do it would be by using your thumb on the trigger. Then you would be able to turn the pistol and use it in that way. The second shot was to the top of the lady's head. Now again, it would be impossible to hold a gun of this type and shoot straight down. You couldn't get your hand high enough above your head. So again, we're looking at the possibility of the thumb being used. Possibly, but it seems a very odd way of doing it. I've never come across a shot being taken from that position.
Several areas of the cylinder.
The defense argued it was perfectly possible, then launched a scathing attack on forensic evidence. Investigators had missed seeing the bullet hole in Rachel's head. So what else might they have overlooked?
It's shocking that they could go into that room and not see the bullet wound in the forehead. It's stunning that careful, meticulous police investigators, laboratory investigators can miss that.
How remarkable is it that a bullet hole could go unnoticed? The jury heard detailed evidence on the bullets used. At .22 caliber, they were the smallest in common use.
The .22 caliber round is less than 1/4 inch in diameter. It's used for hunting small game such as rabbits and squirrels and for target practice. The .44 Magnum is the most powerful handgun in the world, made famous, of course, in the Clint Eastwood movies. It's easy to see that the .22 is much smaller than the .44, and the cartridge case produces a much faster and more powerful impact, whereas the .22 is a relatively low-powered cartridge.
The effect these bullets have is also radically different. The one which killed Rachel Entwistle lodged inside her head and was only detected by X-ray. A larger weapon would have left no doubt as to the cause of death. The defense had still to provide a motive for Rachel's alleged suicide.
They had recently moved and started their lives all over again. She had recently had a baby. Was she being under any medication? You know, what did her friends say about her? Were there signs of depression?
Not even remotely, because this is a girl who loved children and loved life. I mean, the combination, you know, she'd gone into teaching. She'd chosen to spend all her time with children. She was then having a baby. She was absolutely delighted to be doing that. She always had a reason to find the positive. It's just her very nature. So, unimaginable.
Details soon to emerge of Neil Entwistle's secret world seemed equally unimaginable.
Neil Entwistle had an alter ego, you might say, a second reality, and it was online.
Between 2003 and 2006, he registered several websites with different money-making schemes.
Neil Entwistle was trying to make money any way he could. One of the things he tried to sell was how to build your own porn site. His advertisement was, you know, I can teach you how to make millions of dollars in the porn world. Now, I opened up one of his porn sites, and he had an example of it. Stock photos you see in any porn site tended to be a little bit towards the more hardcore. And that was one of his businesses.
This scheme was a failure. And so he turned to eBay.
He would try to sell software and try to sell services online. He didn't always deliver, and so on eBay you can rate the performance of a transaction, and people did not like him. They'd say, stay away from him.
Instead of earning $10,000 a month, as he'd claimed, Neil Entwistle was living on credit cards with debts of around $40,000. When police analyzed his computer hard drive, they found more evidence of a secret and solitary life, far removed from the happy family image.
It came out in court that he was saying to American women, I'm coming over, show me if you're better than British women in bed. It also came out that he was surfing for escorts, code for hooker, prostitute. They had a forensic expert who could dig into Neil Entwistle's laptop and find out when he was on this site, what he was doing. They say he was on them the day of the murders, even after the murders.
A scrap of newspaper found in his pocket after his arrest in London may have hardened opinion amongst the jury still further.
When that came out, you could almost see jurors shake their head. You knew that this was key evidence. Here you have a supposed happily married young dad and husband. It's two polar opposites. You know, a type of Jekyll and Hyde. Who is he?
Over the 2-week trial, observers reported almost no emotion from Neil Entwistle. Except once, when crime scene video was played, showing the bodies exactly as they were found, with classical music picked up by the police camcorder.
It's not a pleasant picture. It's upsetting. It's what bodies look like, 3 days into being dead. It was the strangest thing. All of a sudden, he broke out into this type of half grin, half grimace. It was amazing. He had like this, this kind of like gritting of his teeth. And it looked like a smile, and then again, it didn't.
Foreperson of the jury, have you reached a verdict? Please hand it to the court officer.
Neil Entwistle claimed that not only was he innocent, but his wife was guilty. And so the jury had to decide which of these parents murdered the baby.
Controversy.
Tomorrow night at 9 on CR, a woman holds the key to solving a child murder in Unusual Suspects. Then later at 10, a family man who turned on his loved ones with horrifying results in the Jersey slayings.
In 2008, Neil Entwistle, a British computer scientist, was on trial in America for shooting to death his wife and 9-month-old baby daughter. His behavior in the courtroom puzzled observers. When confronted with video of the victims, was he distressed or amused?
He was not in any way showing signs of grief. Usually in that situation, tears precede the facial expression, which usually breaks up, and it's usually downward turning. This was upward turning. He covered much of this up by the bottom half of his face with his hand. Every action of his face was in fact that of someone who was laughing, who was entertained or amused by what was going on. In a way, he was kind of laughing at his work. He appeared to be almost entertained by the fact that people were horrified, people were upset at this scenario that he had created.
Neil Entwistle has never commented publicly on what was truly going through his mind that day. Another critical factor in the case was Neil Entwistle's phone conversation with police, recorded and played as evidence, despite his lawyer's objection.
It was very clever to conduct the conversation in the manner in which it was conducted. Had he been brought into a police station in the UK, we would have had a different legal standard employed, and I don't conversation would have been permitted.
Juries had to rely on instinct, asking themselves whether that voice had the ring of truth. But technology exists to analyze a voice scientifically.
When you're presented with a situation which is a threat to you, you will have a physiological changes in your body. One of those changes is loss of blood in the vocal cords. That causes a minute frequency change that only technology can pick up.
The technology is widely used by government agencies and insurance companies to catch fraudsters. It works by analyzing speech patterns and voice frequency, comparing a doubtful statement with something that's already known to be true. The defense admitted Neil Entwistle had lied, but said he was covering up his wife's suicide. But this analysis flagged warnings on something that should have been true. Before discovering the bodies, he said he'd made a routine visit to a local shopping mall.
This is the first time when the subject has been asked to give an account of his whereabouts on that specific Friday.
I wanted to go out just to the store to find some computer equipment.
What we saw over here, that a simple activity of like waking up in the morning and going to the shop, which for any normal person will be a simple thing to do, and a simple statement that there's no issues, shouldn't be any issue with it when you're giving information about what you did at that time. However, the technology found that specific piece of information as
The prosecution claimed he never went shopping at all, but instead drove to pick up the gun with which he carried out the killings.
Looking at the overall recording, a lot of the answers indicates that there is risk in the statements. A lot of waffling, a lot of evasion, thinking time, missing details, a lot of gap in the statement itself, which just led us to believe that something is horribly wrong.
But what would the jury make of Neil Entwistle's story? After 11 hours deliberation, they filed back into court.
Charging the defendant with murder in the first degree. What say you foreperson? Is the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty of murder in the first degree of Rachel Entwistle.
On indictment number 2006-387-00. What say you foreperson? Is the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty of murder in the first degree of Lillian Entwistle.
For the parents in this case, the matter was by no means settled. First came a statement in court from Rachel's mother.
Suffering does not begin to describe what we have been enduring without our beloved Rachel and Lillian. For him to have tried to hide behind an accusation of murder, suicide of this beautiful woman and perfect mother is low and despicable.
Neil Entwistle's parents and brother, who'd sat through every day, addressed the waiting media.
We know that our son Neil is innocent, and we are devastated to learn evidence points to Rachel murdering our grandchild and then committing suicide. Our son will now go to jail for loving, honouring and protecting his wife's memory.
Neil Entwistle continues to protest his innocence, and his parents have sworn to pursue every legal avenue to have the verdict overturned. In 2012, they asked for the case to be reopened, arguing that the initial search of the bedroom was in breach of correct procedures. They argue that throughout the trial, the prosecution failed to establish a credible motive for the double murder. Just months before the killings, Neil Entwistle had built a website dedicated to his happy family. He'd run up credit card debts, well qualified to earn a big salary in computing. To those who knew the young couple, they were living the American dream.
This seemed to be a perfect scenario with a nightmare ending, which appeared to have no reasoning, no rationale, no running-up motive. The strange thing is, he seemed to have a total indifference to the reality of having a child, having a wife, having responsibilities. He was not really engaged with other people. They were just pawns in a game that he was creating, and that was actually an indication of what I saw as narcissistic personality disorder, which is quite a rare condition. But something had pricked the bubble of that narcissistic dream he'd created. It may be that he had actually decided to commit suicide. He killed them, and then, as many individuals do, took the coward's way out and decided, I can't really kill myself, but they're dead. What do? I run and I cover it up. But this would only be the actions of someone who has no feelings for other human beings.
Neil Entwistle is serving twin sentences of life without parole. Barring a successful appeal, he'll die in jail for a crime which still seems to have no clear motive. The question that remains is the one that, ironically, he raised himself right at the outset.
I'm not saying you did anything. I'm asking you.
No, that...
Are you sure?
Yeah, because
why?
Well, just... Of course, that... No, why would I do that?
Elite detectives reinvestigate a controversial double murder. Will they reach the same conclusion second time round? Brand new Dead Again on Wednesday at 10.